guys, welcome back to Nighty Night. We have a very special episode today. Today is Corrin's Takeover, and she is going to tell us a unsolved story. I am personally very excited to hear this. She's been hyping it up as her favorite. Um, I've come to the conclusion that it's probably aliens, but we'll see. We'll see how that goes. Um, and then next week, I will be taking over.
Yes, and very excited for that.
I highly doubt that, but I am very excited for today.
I'm excited for today, too. This is definitely one of those stories that, I think about often because it just kind of drives me crazy.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, so let's get into it. So, for anybody who doesn't know the story, just kind of like a quick rundown. This is about the Yuba County 5, and it kind of all centers around Plumas National Forest in California. It's kind of high up in the mountains, and this is where 5 young men with some sort of intellectual or psychiatric disability went missing.
Ooh.
Yes. So, on the 24th of February, 1978, 29-year-old Bill Sterling, 24-year-old Jack Hewitt, which most people called him Jackie, and there is 2 Jacks in this story, so I will be referring to him as Jackie.
Okay.
So we can keep them separate. 32-year-old Ted Weir, 25-year-old Gary Mathias, and 30-year-old Jack Madruga. They attended a basketball game at California State University in Chico. So they all became friends because they all attended a day program for adults, and they all played on the basketball team that was run through this
What
day
was
program.
the program?
It was, I don't know exactly. I can't remember exactly what it was called, but it's just like a daytime thing for adults with disabilities.
Oh, okay.
Where they can go and, do different activities and stuff. So I'll kind of give you a little rundown of the guys. Jack Madruga, he was the most independent of the group. He had spent a couple of years in the Army, and he was one of the only ones in the group that actually had a driver's license, and he is the one that drove the men to the game that night.
Okay.
Now, Jack had a 1967 Mercury Montego, and he was really proud of this car. He loved this car so much. And his closest friend of the group was Bill Sterling. So Bill had left his house that evening with 4 different maps of the California area. And Bill used to have a job, but his mom actually made him quit because his coworkers were getting him drunk and stealing his money.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, really taking advantage of him. But this is a side note for Bill, was he actually used to spend a lot of his time volunteering at hospitals and would just go in and read to the patients and stuff.
Aww.
I thought that was nice. So then we have Jackie. And Jackie was the most severely disabled of all 5 men. He was the youngest of all of them. And he had actually spent most of his childhood in a hospital, which at the time he stayed there was called the Napa Insane Asylum.
Wow.
Yeah. And Jack couldn't read or write. He relied on his mother heavily for his daily tasks, and also his best friend, which was Ted. So that brings us to Ted. Ted was supposed to have a basketball tournament the next day, which would have been the 25th. And he really loved playing basketball, and he had already set out all of his clothes. He cleaned his shoes. He was ready for the game for the next day. And he was particularly excited for the game because if his team won, they got a trip to LA.
Ooh.
Yes. And I had also read several places that Ted was like super friendly, and he would actually get upset if like he were to wave at somebody out in public and they didn't wave back.
Same.
Yeah. So he was very friendly. And then that brings us to the last man, and we have Gary Mathias. So Gary served in the military as well, but he was medically discharged due to psychiatric issues related to his schizophrenia. And the other parents were not thrilled at all with Gary being in the group. He had a history of violence. He had a criminal record. He'd been charged with assault twice, breaking and entering. He started using drugs during his time in the military and then continued as he got out. And then after he got out, he would also refuse to take his medication. So, and then all 5 men still lived with their parents. So they weren't fully independent, but they still had some independence. So let's go back to February 24th. So all 5 of the men head out to a basketball game in Chico, which Chico is about an hour away from where they lived in Yuba City. And then as the morning of the 25th hits, Ted's mom starts to worry, and she calls the parents of the other men. When she finds out none of the others are home yet either, she, obviously starts to panic. And she knew that something had to be wrong, and for many reasons, but mainly because Ted, just like the other men, had very set routines.
Right.
They had a structure of what they liked to do every day, how their day was going to go, and they didn't like to change from that. So staying out all night would be, a huge change in their normal routines. So about 8 p.m. on Saturday the 25th, the parents contact the police, and police puts out an alert to the public for people to be on the lookout for the men and Jack's car. Now, the police weren't super concerned at first because despite, the men having disabilities, they were adults.
Right.
But they were able to confirm that the men did, in fact, go to the game. And then they went to a convenience store afterwards at around 10 p.m. And they just bought a bunch of snacks. So then later, a woman calls in and she says that she had seen the guys that night, but that they were in a red pickup truck. Yeah. And she said 2 of them came into her store to buy food. Another of them went to the payphone while the other 2 stayed inside the truck. Now, police don't originally think that this sighting was accurate because where this woman's store was way further than they should have been. It wasn't in any kind of direction that would have made sense for them to be at.
Interesting.
Yes. So they don't really think that it's accurate at first. But then a man named Joe calls police to say that Friday night, the night of the game, that he was driving up a mountain road to check out the area, and his car got stuck in the snow. So he tries pushing it out, but as he's doing so, he has a heart attack. So he gets back in his car, just waited out, I guess, hoping somebody would see him.
Gosh.
Yeah. And he says a few hours after this, he's sitting in his car and he hears someone whistling. So he gets out and starts to look around, and he sees a group of men and a woman holding a baby. And he says he also sees 2 cars. So he tries to, yell and flag them down. But as soon as he started doing that, the headlights of the cars shut down and he couldn't hear or see anyone anymore after that.
Ooh, that's eerie.
Yeah. So, he just gets back into his car and he waits. And then a little bit later, he sees more lights. But this time he says it's not headlights, it's actually flashlights. And, again, he tries to yell. But then, again, when he does, all the lights shut off.
That's so weird.
Yeah. So, he gets back to his car and just waits it out. He finally runs out of gas.
Oh, gosh.
So he starts walking back down the mountain. And while he's walking, he passes a car in the snow on the side of the road, just, slightly down from where his was stuck. And the car that he sees is a 1967 Mercury Montego. 4 days after the men went missing, a forest worker then calls police to tell them that he thinks that he found the car they've been looking for and that it's in Plumas National Forest. And this is also a couple of hours from where they live and also from where the basketball game was. And at this time, this area had about 6 to 8 feet of snow.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and it's just way out in the middle of nowhere. So after they get that call, because originally they thought maybe Joe was, since he had a heart attack, maybe he was delusional,
right?
But then they get the call from the forest worker that was in the same area Joe was, and Joe's story kind of
lined up.
Yeah, it makes more sense now. So police go out to the car, and the car's unlocked with no one in it, just a bunch of empty snack wrappers. They found that the car was stuck in the snow, but that it could have been easily pushed out with, all 5 guys out pushing it. And there were no marks in the snow to indicate that they had even tried to push it out. And the car had gas in it, and then the police hotwired the car to see if it had broken down, and that was why they were there. But after they hotwired it, it started right up. So it wasn't broken down. And also, the road that they were on, it was not a well-traveled road at all. It had snow and ice all over it. I mean, they did not, maintain it to keep the snow off of it.
Wow.
It was also really bumpy, and there was a lot of holes and dips. And when they were examining Jack's car, they realized that his car had no damage to it at all, which is only weird because even the police cars had damage from traveling up that road to get to Jack's car from, all of the dips and stuff.
Aliens.
Yeah. But Jack's car had no damage.
Okay.
So that kind of made them think that whoever drove up there, maybe they knew the road and where to drive to avoid the potholes. But the parents say that none of the men would have known that area. The police search the entire area for the next 5 days, but a snowstorm actually hits, and it makes it really hard for them to search because some spots were getting up to 15 feet high and snow drifts.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So they had a couple of close calls with some of the searchers here and there. And they didn't originally think that foul play was involved. But after the 10th day, and they still had found nothing, they started to rethink that, maybe what if they stopped to help somebody and maybe they were taken advantage of. So this is kind of a weird part to the story. But 3 weeks later, a woman in Yuba City reported to police that she got a phone call from somebody. And when she picked up, a man said, "I know where the missing 5 men are," and just hung up. The next day, the same man calls her back and says, "I need help because I really hurt those guys bad." And when she asks who he hurt, he said, "Don't play dumb with me," and hung up. And then again, the next day, he calls back and tells her those 5 guys are all dead, and hung up. And then that was it. She never heard from him again.
What is going on?
Yeah. So, I don't know where that leads to, but it's very interesting. So then at some point the police do find out that Gary has friends that live somewhere between the basketball game and where the boys lived. I guess if they were going to see his friends, the road in which they would turn to go see these friends, I guess you could easily miss it. And if you were to miss it, then that could land you in the mountains somewhere.
Okay.
But the police did find the friends and talk to them.
Okay.
And they said that they hadn't heard from Gary in a long time and were definitely not expecting to see him that night.
Okay.
So we don't know if he was going there or not, but these friends didn't think so. So then 3 months later in May.
3 months?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. 3 months later, police get a call from a motorcyclist that was driving through the area with a group of people. They noticed a service trailer, and then they saw that there was a window broken. So, they went over to check it out, and as they got to the building, they started noticing a really terrible smell. And
that's never good.
No. So they look inside, and they see a deceased man under a bunch of blankets, and that man was Ted. Ted was found, his pants were rolled up above his knees, and his legs had gangrene, and he was missing 5 toes due to frostbite. Ted was around 200 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
And when they found him, he was only around 100 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So this trailer is about 19 miles from where the car was found. So they had to travel that far to get there in the snow. So they actually estimate that Ted was alive in the shelter for 8 to 13 weeks. And they figured that out because of the growth of his beard.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So he was alive for quite some
long time.
And his cause of death was that he froze and he starved to death. However, this is the weird part, but there was a propane tank outside of the trailer that could have been used to heat the inside.
Oh my gosh.
Plus, there was a ton of stuff in there to start a fire. You know, wooden furniture, papers, books, all that kind of stuff.
That's so sad.
And they did burn a candle. Then they also find 31 cans of food that were open and emptied. That food was originally in a storage locker outside, but there was also another storage locker next to it that had a lot more food inside of it. And the police say that it was enough food to feed all 5 men for a whole year.
Wait, how did he starve then?
I don't know. They had tons of food and they could have had heat in their shelter.
Okay.
So they find Ted's ring and necklace that I guess he wore all the time. And they found his wallet on a table next to the bed. And then they also find a gold watch next to Ted's body on that same table. But it didn't belong to him or any of the other guys.
Okay, suspicious.
Yeah. So Ted was the only one found in the shelter, but they did find signs that maybe some of the others had been there too.
Okay.
One of them was that Gary's shoes were there, but Ted's were not.
Okay.
So Ted's shoes were missing. Another reason is the cans of food. They had been opened using an army can opener. And then also the way that the blankets were on Ted's body, it looked as if, you know, somebody had placed them over him. So police start searching the area again after they find Ted. And 2 days later, it was about 4.5 miles from the shelter, they find the remains of Jack Madruga and Bill.
Oh no.
Jack's cause of death was exposure, and Bill's remains were too decomposed, but I assume, you know, you can assume they were probably exposure.
Right.
So police keep searching, and they're still trying to find the youngest of the bunch, Jackie, and Gary is also still missing. And Jackie's dad, at this point, he joins in on the search, kind of against the advice of the police, because Jackie was still out there somewhere.
Right.
They start their search for Jackie, and Jack's dad is walking along the road, and he spots some of Jack's clothes. He sees his jeans, his jacket, and his shoes. So he goes over and he picks up the jacket, and a spine falls out of the jacket, which I would say is number one reason why the police did not want him.
How traumatizing.
Yes. Yeah. The next day they find his skull. It was a little bit further away. I guess it was down by a creek area, but they also think that animals had been around and kind of dragged them around a little bit. So Jackie was found between the shelter and where Jack and Bill were found.
Okay.
And then later on, about 1/2 mile from the shelter, they find 3 wool emergency blankets and a flashlight. So then in June, they ended their search with Gary still not found. So this is the main theory of the police. So police think that Ted, Jackie, and Gary made it to the trailer that night, but that the other 2 died on the way. Now, they think that Jack may have been in the shelter because of where his body was found, kind of in, you know, in the middle of everybody, and that maybe he could have possibly left, you know, after Ted died.
Okay.
Maybe him and Ted were in there by themselves, and then he didn't want to stick around. And then they think Gary was there because of the shoes. Gary's shoes were there. But also the fact that he would have been the only one of the three to know how to use that army can opener.
Right.
So, and I mean, this is kind of a side note, but before they find Ted's body during the first search, police do find a cabin in the area, and they find a gray lighter outside, like on the ground.
Okay.
The families say that none of the men carried a lighter, so that they didn't think that it belonged to any of them. Now, whether this is relevant or if it was just maybe a random visitor dropped it, we don't know, but I just thought it might be worth mentioning. One more side note is, and this is not verified, but a poster on Reddit actually claims to be close to one of the families. Ooh. And this person says that they know some information that police never released. And they say that the police actually found baby clothes and blankets inside the car.
Baby, I forgot about the woman and the baby.
And that they also found shell casings outside near the car. So, take this with a grain of salt because it isn't verified.
Right.
But police do tend to hold certain details back during an investigation, just in case they ever get a real lead. They have something that they can kind of use to verify it.
Okay.
That really brings us to the end of that story.
So wait, Gary was never found?
Gary was the only one that's never been found.
That's so weird.
Yeah, it's very suspicious, especially knowing Gary's history. And if he... let's say Gary wasn't taking his medication at this time. He could have, been having hallucinations. I actually did read a story when he was charged with breaking and entering. He had actually broken into like an older couple's house, I think. And they woke up in the middle of the night to him standing in their bedroom talking about like a ring that he needed to take to Satan. I would say that was obviously a hallucination. Right. I guess those are the kinds of things that could happen when he's not
But what would have happened to Gary? Would he have made a new life for himself? Was that possible?
Well, see, I don't know, because he would have had to get out of that area somehow.
Right. Oh, that's true.
But they never found his body. So if he would have died up there, I would think after the months of searching that they did, or even within the next few years. I mean, it was a national park, so there's visitors there all the time.
Would Gary have called that lady? Although he said there was 5 bodies. He heard the 5.
Yeah, he does say 5. Yeah, I never thought about that. Because that's kind of what I thought too. Maybe that was Gary. But he does say all 5. Yeah, I'm not sure.
That really is a crazy story. I'm going further from my alien hypothesis. Wow.
But, we don't know where
I'm so confused. I mean, I know that they were disabled, but obviously they seem to have known how to care for themselves a little bit.
Yeah.
To at least get into the food or make a fire at the very least. For the one that died in the trailer.
Well, they didn't make a fire.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
Oh,
they seem capable of making one.
Yes. Yeah, and especially if Gary was there, Gary, I would think, would absolutely know how to start a fire being in the army.
Oh, Gare.
Yeah.
What happened?
Like I said, they did light a candle, but they didn't.
Yeah.
They didn't.
So obviously, one of them knew what they were doing to light a candle at the very least. What a terrible way to die.
Yeah. And also, the biggest question that I always have is, let's say, their car did get stuck and maybe they couldn't push it out or didn't think to. I don't know why they would walk out into forest instead of just walking straight down the road. Because actually, Joe, his original plan was that he would walk, it was like 8 miles or something back to where he was staying with his family. But when he gets down to the end of the mountain road, there's like a ranger cabin
Okay.
or something that he's able to go to and get help.
Okay.
So if they would have just walked straight down the mountain, they would have just been able to go there and maybe wait till morning.
Ugh.
But instead they decided to walk out
Into the forest.
Yeah, with all the snow and stuff.
Sounds like someone was definitely steering them wrong.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah. I tend to believe that somebody had to have led them out that way or made them go out that way or something.
So Joe was the one having the heart attack,
Yes.
right? Okay. So why would they turn off their flashlights every time they heard someone?
Yeah, I know. That's another thing that I question too. And especially because most of these men, I mean, like I said, Bill went to the hospital to read to patients.
Right.
And Ted gets upset when somebody doesn't wave to him out
Right.
in public. So I would think that they would be more likely to help somebody.
Right.
And maybe that is what happened and they got taken advantage of that way. But yeah, I would definitely think that if they were able to help Joe, it seems
They
like
would
they
have.
would have. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, maybe there was some reason why they couldn't. But the woman holding a baby really
Mm-hmm.
gets me. And now I couldn't find anywhere that said more about the woman that owned the store because she doesn't say anything about seeing a woman and a baby.
Okay.
You know, she sees the two guys sitting in the car.
And the pickup truck.
Yeah.
But they never found the pickup truck.
No. She doesn't mention seeing anybody else in the pickup truck. Whose pickup truck was it? If there was nobody else with them, then either Jack Madruga or I believe Gary had a driver's license as well. So, but the other guys didn't. So it had to have been one of those two driving.
Right.
Jack's parents don't think that he knew that area. And I'm pretty sure it was Jack where his parents say that he actually hated camping.
Okay. Same.
Yeah. So for him to just go out there, you know, just trying to have a good time would not be something that he would do. And so they don't think he would know that area. So another question is, how did his car get all the way up there with no damage?
That is wild.
And the fact that Jack loved his car so much and took so much pride in it, he would have never let somebody else willingly drive his car.
Right.
So if somebody else drove it up there, then it would have had to been against his will, I would say. Because as much pride as he took in his car, I don't think he would have let somebody else drive it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wonder what happened.
I know. It's a very crazy story that, like I said, this is why it drives me nuts, because you can pose a bunch of different theories,
right?
But then almost as soon as you pose one theory,
it doesn't make sense with the other
with
ones.
something else.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's
I wonder what happened to Gary.
Yes, that's what I was just gonna say. I always wonder that. I mean, you would think at least within the few years after that, somebody in the area would spot bones or, you know,
him.
Yeah. Just him just hanging out, maybe. But yeah, nothing's ever been found of old Gary. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can see why that drives you nuts.
I know.
I'm probably going to be thinking about it the rest of the day.
Yeah. It's really crazy.
That was a spooky story, by the way. You told me it wasn't scary, but that was a little spooky.
Spooky?
Yeah.
What? The only thing I think would really be spooky was the call that the woman in Yuba City got.
I think it's spooky to freeze and starve to death.
Well, yeah.
I can't believe you just hung out in that trailer that long.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's another question, though, is if he was alive for 8 to 13 weeks, why had he lost so much weight? There was tons of food, and there was 31 cans opened. Was he not one of the ones that consumed that food?
I know. It was all Gary, probably.
It could have been. If he had lost that much weight, there's no way that he was eating.
No.
Gary came in and opened food and ate it for himself, and then took off, I guess, is a possibility.
That is crazy. Are their parents still alive?
Probably not now.
I mean, that was what, 78?
It was 78, yeah.
What year is it? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and they were all older too.
Okay.
I mean, with the youngest being 24, so.
How sad.
Yeah. It's very sad, and it's very confusing.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
You should do unsolved mysteries more often.
I should. Maybe we'll do some more here and there.
Give me a little scare before I go to bed.
Yeah.
Love it.
And you guys should go to our Facebook page or Instagram or Twitter and let us know what your theory is.
Ooh.
Because I'd be interested to hear everybody else's theories. Because I have a few of mine, but...
Is aliens in any of them?
No.
I guess it can't be aliens.
No, but it is always aliens.
If you don't know who did it, it's aliens.
Yeah, we could chalk it up to that and then say mystery solved. But I still don't think that I could solve it in my mind.
Right.
With aliens.
All right.
Give you something to think about the rest of your day.
I will. It will haunt me. Yeah. What happened to you, Gary? Where are you?
Where did Gary go? Maybe he was in the Bahamas now and...
listening to this?
Yeah. Possibly.
Well, that was Corrin's takeover for the week. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Please do more. As I said earlier, next week will be my takeover. And while a lot of people may not be interested in it, I do think there are some people out there who will find it interesting and hopefully even funny. Mine is not spooky nor scary. It doesn't leave you wondering who did what. So please check it out next week. Like Corrin said, we have a Facebook page, Instagram, Twitter. What else? Isn't there something else?
Well, and our website.
Our website.
Check out, yes.
Leave your theories of what you think happened this week.
Yes.
And then
I want to know.
Give us a like or a follow. Anything you want to hear or have any suggestions, we are open.
Yeah, absolutely.
Please follow us. As always, we will be posting on Wednesday evenings. So listen next week, and thank you for listening today.
Nighty
night.